Up next, one of the great hidden gems of the year 1986 from a British band that can't really be genre-fide, you know? They have elements of new wave and rock, jazz, pop, and soul. Some now call it Sophisti-pop. Years later, had one of the most memorable first 10 seconds of a song that was released that year. The singer-songwriter of this band gives us the story of just an elegant 86 hit that you'll be jazzed to rediscover next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you've ever bought certain albums on vinyl and then rebought them when they came out on cassette, when they were the rage, and then did it again when CDs were the exciting new technology, and have now come full circle buying them on vinyl again, you're going to love this channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now, and do look us up on Patreon to become an insider with us. By the way, that was Kevin McGauley. He shared that memory with us in the comments. Share yours in the comments, and we may just use it. It's time for another episode of our series, Revelations, where featured artists reveal rare stories about their greatest songs and albums. Now, if you're anything like me, I always love to rediscover a hidden gem from the 80s that, while a hit in its day, didn't suffer from overplay by radio or our culture, but that's just as great as the most popular songs that did come out that year. It's such a breath of fresh air when your ears are presented with such a gift. Digging Your Scene by the Blow Monkeys is exactly one of those gifts. The song charted all over the globe in 86. It went to number 14 here in the Billboard Hot 100. Went to number 12 in the UK, and it went to top 10 in other parts of the world, including New Zealand. It's just an elegant slice of jazzy new wave soul. It has a very cool story to it as well. I was fortunate to do a Zoom session with the Blow Monkeys frontman and songwriter guitarist Dr. Robert. He gives us the goods in this exclusive interview, and you're not going to want to miss it. He also tells us about the Blow Monkeys' 40th anniversary plans. Can you imagine? It's been 40 years. As we go into this interview with Dr. Robert, I want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, that helps make this possible. It's a brand I always wear. Now, when you go to Zenni.com and you order a pair of glasses, you can say goodbye to foggy lenses and glare with Zenni's advanced 2-in-1 anti-fog and anti-reflective coating. I have it on mine, these ones here, and it really is a game changer. Check it out today. Here's Dr. Robert. Well, one of your most provocative songs that you've composed, also your biggest hit, Digging Your Scene, phenomenal song, 86. Which you've described as an example of your soul side coming to the forefront of your songwriting. Starting with the rumor that you didn't think too much of the song. It was actually the last song that you wrote for Animal Magic.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure about it, and I brought it in. I thought it was like, to like a sort of Marvin Gaye thing. I thought, but when the band started to play it, you know, they convinced me, and I still didn't think it was a single, but I was wrong. Yeah, it changed my life really, because I we recorded it, and then I came over to New York to ostensibly, I thought, to meet Arthur Baker. But actually I met a guy called Michael Baker, who was working at Arthur Baker's studio, Unique, in New York. And we played around with the backing track and drums and changed stuff, you know, kept a lot of the original, but changed it enough to think, wow, there's something really special here. By the time we finished that remix, when I came up to New York, I thought we had something there.
So when you first wrote it, what was the genesis of that?
It was born out of this comment. I think it was the time of the AIDS thing, and there was a lot of misinformation flying about. I remember, and although I'm not gay, and I went to a lot of those clubs in London because a lot of my friends were gay, and those clubs was open all night, and there was a real great vibe, and the music was great, and they went on all night, and it was joyous. The one in particular that I used to go to called Taboo, but then there was this kind of press campaign that was full of misinformation and scare stories. So I think there was this thing about it being God's revenge, stuff like that. So I took that and just kind of wrote it as a kind of tribute, I guess is not the right word, like a paean, like to that scene and what that scene had done for me and my friends and the music that was coming out. So that was really what it was about. You know, that was the genesis of the song.
I think it's pretty shocking for people now in the world that we live in that some of those things went on. It was so amazing to me that the phobia that was there and the lack of information and humanity.
No compassion. And the same was true in the UK. And the whole thing was based around misinformation and fear. And of course, the backlash to it was that, people were being treated very badly. So that was just my own little response to that, I guess.
Well, I mean, it took a lot of artistic courage at that time to put out that song as a single. There were a lot of people within that probably 2 or 3 year period, Bronx-ski beat, Small Town Boy. And some of those that would bring that to the forefront of the conversation. And that's what music does, is it can bring about social change. Did you have to fight for it to be the second single?
No, I didn't have to fight. That was always going to happen. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't convinced at first, but then by the time we'd done the remix and stuff, it felt right. I still didn't think it would be a hit because I didn't think the chorus was strong enough. That was my weird kind of reaction to it. But I mean, it just shows you I'm a really bad judge. And I get why it was. And it was a real life changer for us because that was the one that opened up the doors to everything else. I mean, it opened up. Suddenly we were traveling, suddenly we were playing in the States and we were doing like Dick Clark's American Bandstand. And
Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
The first gig we ever did in the States was Red Rocks, supporting Robert Palmer, who was number one at the time. So we went straight in, and yeah, it was fantastic. I wouldn't have. It was a wild time, but it was a great time, and I'm really thankful to the guy called Corder Marshall, who put me in touch with Michael Baker in New York, because that little trip that I went on my own and did that changed all of our lives.
Memory serves, I believe that you were reading an article in a pop star. I think it might have been Donna Summer. It was a quote or something that inspired some of the lyrics for Digging Yourself.
Yeah, I think Donna Summer, who herself was a gay icon with I Feel Love and all that, had said something at some point about it being God's revenge. And I think later on she did retract that. But it's not her fault. That was just a comment. I thought I'd take that. But there were a lot, it wasn't just her, there were a lot of people spreading misinformation, just like recent times, in your country, there are a lot of people doing that, and in our country too. So it's still going on. But it was music that politicized me, really, as a youngster. It was music that enlightened me, that made me interested in the world. Like punk bands like The Clash. The Jam in the UK. And then it would have been people like Dylan. That just lead you on a kind of archaeological dig into finding out, well, what's going on here? That I hadn't been turned on by at school. I always thought that music had that function, and that it works best when it's coming from the heart. I don't mean it should be dictatorial or like a manifesto, because it's got to be a good song. There's no point in having a message in the song unless the song itself is good. There's some great songs out in the. I don't know if they were hits in America, but the Specials in the UK with songs like Ghost Town. And Free Nelson Mandela. Were fantastic records, but they were also educational. They changed people's lives. Music, the best times I've ever had at a gig are as an audience member, but also as a performer, are when it's not about me or that guy or that band on stage or whatever it is. It's when you hit the sweet spot and something happens. They call it duende here in Spain. There's something magic comes in the room, and it's about everyone. And that's what music can do.
And we talk about that togetherness. I mean, when there's a certain song on, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or rich or poor or what your race is. It becomes everybody singing the same song together, and all those things go away.
Absolutely. They're just, all those things are surface. They're just part of your upbringing, your conditioning, your mindset. But there's something else that we all have that's much deeper and that's in common. And, we shouldn't forget that, because that's the only way I believe that we'll survive.
Music's the great connector. Yep.
One of them, yeah, it's one of them for sure. It's
no question.
That's the thing. And one of the things I love about here in Spain is that that's still part of the culture here. People do get together at their little weekend corticos, and someone will play a little bit, and someone will cook, and they'll all sing. They'll all sing. It's a community thing. That community song and taking part, it's a social glue. It's a magic thing that happens. They're not sitting alone with headphones. It's inclusive. Kids, people, everyone.
Digging Your Scene, it had that opening line. It's such a great line, but it's also a painful reality when it says, "I just got your message, baby." I just got your message, baby. That's a great opening line. It really sets you up as a listener. I remember the first time I heard the song as a kid, growing up in the 80s. When it came, I used to listen to the American Top 40 Countdown that they had every week, Casey Kasem, and I remember when I heard it, that captured me immediately. But when it says, "So sad to see you fade away, what in the world is this feeling to catch a breath and leave me reeling?" Very powerful. In your writing process, a few people have talked about you got to be ready for that muse to kind of just touch you. And sometimes it's almost like you're not even writing the song. It just takes over, that muse does. What was it like with this song?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I was living on my own in a little flat in South London, and I had bought one of those very early drum machines, they were called. I think 303 or 603, I can't remember. They later became very big in the sort of acid house days, but these were little things I couldn't figure out. I had a very basic thing, but I had a beat going that was a bit like Sexual Healing. I had that kind of thing going. And I think that, like a lot of my songs, the first line is really important. You really got to get people in. And I think that was the first thing that came to me, was that whole first verse. And then I'm off, So then it's a process of these days, as I've been doing it a long time, a lot of it is in the head, but in those days it was about repetition. I just keep chipping away. I play it, or I walk around with the acoustic guitar all day. Where am I going with this? Where does that go, A lot of the time, I wouldn't have a tape recorder, because at that point I was thinking, if it's good enough, I'll remember it in the morning. God knows how many songs I've lost that way though. So I stopped doing that. But it was a process of just walking around the house playing it until I felt that I'd finished it. Because one of the things that I liked was that we would get deadlines. We were going in to do some new songs, we were recording, and that the onus was on me to come up with those. So I went very fast from when we started to that point, writing. I mean, the album that we got signed on never came out, because by the time we recorded the first album, I'd written a new one. I just had to keep going, get better and better. I knew that I had to get better, because I was a beginner. I didn't come from a musical background. I had no grounding in it. I'd never played with anyone before. So and that's kind of maybe why some of my songs were a bit idiosyncratic to start with and a bit odd. By the time we got to Animal Magic, I had, the kind of soul, like I said, the soul thing was back. When I was a kid, a lot of things like Band of Gold by Frida Payne were massive records for me as a child. Aretha Franklin albums that we had around the place. Dusty in Memphis, I remember we had, and things like that. Big, big influence on me.
And you can hear a little bit of that. It's not exactly like that in this song, but the music arrangement of Digging Your Scene, so elegant and sophisticated. It's got a little bit of that new wave romanticism in it. It takes a little sting off the message without discounting the gravity of what you're singing about.
I'd like to think that I was just myself again. Now tell me why.
And that's part of the genius to me about Digging Your Scene. It's compelling and thought-provoking without, frightening the listener. It's something where it's enough ear candy to tune in and then you hear the message.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just, I've always liked that juxtaposition, I mean, credit goes to Pete Wilson, who wrote the strings for that. Strings are fantastic on that record. I've always liked that thing where if you're trying to, it wasn't a message song, but if you're trying to say something and that you make sure that the song itself draws people in, not just the message. It has to be a good song as well, I think.
And I think that's where I was reading an article the other day that says, where are all these great protest songs with what's going on now? Whereas in the 60s, there were all these great protest songs that we're still listening to. And I think it's because that's gotten crossed. It has to be a good song first. And I think that's what those great records in the 60s did, is For What It's Worth. And
Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
And some of these songs that came out at that time, Respect and things like that. When you hear Respect, certainly Aretha was trying to say something there, but it was a great song. And so that is why it's been listened to by hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, because it's a great song first and then the message weaves its way in.
Absolutely. And, for me, obviously, a big influence on a lot of that kind of way of doing stuff was Curtis Mayfield. Way back in the Impressions days, People Get Ready, stuff like that, using those kind of gospel tunes to put something over. And then it gets more radical as it goes on, choice of colours.
You had a choice of colours.
All the way up to We're a Winner.
To show the world we have no fear, 'cause we're a winner.
And then solo stuff like Move On Up.
And keep on wishing.
I mean, they're great songs, but they're great words as well. And this is the perfect kind of balance.
It can be difficult to balance art and social commentary, but this is a song I think that did it well.
I'm like a boy among men. I'm like a permanent friend.
I don't know if you've heard the term Sophisti-pop.
I haven't. I never knew what it meant.
It's kind of like this new thing that's happened over the last 5 to 10 years where people are taking a music that's already happened 30 years before or sometimes even 40 years before, and they're naming it retrospectively. They've done that with some of the late 70s, early 80s soft rock. They call it yacht rock. And they've done that with the mid 80s UK Blow Monkeys and Basha. Joe Jackson. And they call it Sophisti-pop because it's sophisticated jazz elements in pop.
This sophisticated thing, always puzzled me because I'm not at all. People are not. That's not really where I'm at, and I'm not really interested in sophistication. In fact, I'm quite against it in some ways. But I guess I can't help just being me, and so maybe that comes across in that way sometimes. But it's not. I've always liked pop. I've always liked pop music. And pop music is not a derogatory term. Pop music's changed the world. Pop music's, Motown is pop music. Hey Joe by Jimi Hendrix is pop music. There was so much. It's just. But I understand that people need to label it, especially in these days of Spotify. When you put something up on Spotify, they ask you to label yourself. They give you all these subgenres and tell you. So you go, I never know what the hell to put on these things. What the hell? The menu of labels, and I don't know where we are. So I always hit the wrong one, which is why we never get a playlist. I usually end up in alternative folk or something. I don't know what we are. You tell me. It's not my job, you do that. The journalists can do that. But it's nonsense really, isn't it?
It really is. Well, the Blow Monkeys are just amazing musicians. I mean, you had such amazing musicians in the band. I got to give special props to to the band for their huge contributions on Digging Your Scene. I can't give enough praise for the incredible tenor sax performance by Neville Hendry. I mean, wow. Neville's sax and your vocal together, it was the magic that came together on that song.
I just got your message, baby.
Yeah, Neville is like, he's the original Blow Monkey, really. He's the guy that, he's the soul of the band. You know, he's a tough Scotsman, quite dry, doesn't give a lot away, but he plays with such passion, it all comes out. It all comes out in his saxophone playing. Really funny, because he always comes off stage and he thinks it was awful. And it never is. It's always amazing, and everyone's amazed by him. And yet, so I think the fact that he's never happy is the key to his success, because he's always pushing harder. You know, the saxophone is not always easy to fit into pop music. There have been times when it's not been hip, it's not been popular. He's got a kind of punk ethic to it. He can make it really growl, but he can also make it sing. But it always makes it work. So, you know, it's an essential part of our sound as much as my vocal in some ways.
Well, I think that's what a lot of the great ones are. They always walk off stage and say, man, I was horrible. I heard, since Eddie Van Halen passed, I've heard people tell stories about how he'd walk off stage and say, did you hear my solo tonight? It was horrid. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? What? That was amazing. But they're always trying to push themselves to be greater. And
that's part of it. I don't think it's a good thing to be a self-satisfied musician. It's probably it's not a place that you really should be. Come off and go, I'll tell you what, I was great tonight. There are people out there that probably are a bit like that.
What do you remember about recording it? Was it something where it just kind of came together, or did you and Neville, because the way that you guys came together, the vocal and the sax there, how was that arranged? You remember?
We often had a good way. He often fed off what I was doing. So he would, I might hum a little bit, but he'd pick it up straight away, and he'd come in with something which it always seemed right. And it's always very early takes with Neville as well. Don't get into self-consciousness. Don't get into repetition. Don't get into recording it a million times. I always say to them, just make sure that mic is on and you're recording the very first take that he does, because that's usually 90% of what we use. It's just we just have got something between us both. He responds well to my kind of vocal lines, and it always just seems to work.
Well, and those soulful backup vocals too, by Dixie Peach and Morris Michael. That was the first time, if my memory serves, that you enlisted backing vocals, wasn't it?
On that album, yeah. Yeah. Again, and we added some more in New York. And the New York backing singers blew my mind when they came in, because they had so much attitude and so much, energy. They really lifted it. So I love that. I always like that call and response thing. In my head, I always thought, well, that would work, but I was never sure until we actually tried it. And I think that was part of the key to that song's success, the kind of call and response in the verses thing, which is a little bit, like a lot of people my age, Young Americans was a big record. The way that those backing vocals, and then you go further and you find out what he was copying, where he got it from, that whole Philly thing. So I always loved that kind of, Gladys Knight and the Pips, for instance, the way that the interactions with the vocals, blew my mind. That's why I love the Impressions, because they were basically a vocal group when they started out, going all the way back to like Platters and things like that. I just love that tradition.
Mixed bass and Tony's drum line really accentuated Digging Your Scene with that just irresistible jazzy groove. And Digging Your Scene, it became an international hit, number 12 in the UK, number 14 in the Billboard Hot 100 here in America, and number 7 on the Dance Club Play Chart in America. I always loved the Dance Club Play Chart in America, especially during the 80s, because that's where the great songs, to me, I was a new wave kid, and so that was where the bands that I adored got the adoration that they deserved. It also hit top 25 all over Europe and other parts of the world. What changed for you as an artist when you had a hit in the U.S.? Obviously, it turned up the volume a little bit on your career.
Yeah, big time. I mean, it was unexpected because we gained a certain kind of place on this college thing, but with Forbidden Fruit. But I didn't expect because not a lot of British bands at that time were having hits in America. It was kind of wild to suddenly find ourselves on Dick Clark American Bandstand, like I said to you, which I'd seen as a kid. You know, I knew all about this thing, but I mean, it seemed a bit surreal, to be honest. I loved playing America. It's a shame that we didn't, you know, really. We had a kind of situation where the record companies kind of fell out. The RCA America, RCA UK. So we didn't really follow it up in the way that we should have done, because we had bigger hits in the UK after Digging, but not in America. In America, in fact, what happened was that we were known more for a track that we had on Dirty Dancing soundtrack afterwards, the cover of You Don't Know Me.
Don't tell you what to say, and I don't.
Which nobody knew was going to be as big as it was. It ended up being. We toured that time in '86, and it was so enjoyable, such a buzz. You know, it was just American audiences were just fantastic. Wherever we went, it felt like we were in a film. It didn't feel real at times. So it was, you know, and obviously because of America, Japan was big, and Digging was really the one that opened the doors, you know. If I'm really honest, I still really enjoy, we still play it, and obviously we play it, and I still really enjoy more than ever singing it now. You know, it's just, it's a life changer. So I'm not going to deny that I still enjoy it.
It's one of the 80s songs that first 10 seconds, you know exactly what it is. It really is iconic how you came up with the little guitar, the dun 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 dun. The background vocals, and then you come in with that first line.
I just got your message, baby.
It separates it from all the other songs from that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of you to say so. I always thought that the first 10 seconds of a record were really essential. You know, When Doves Cry. What an opening, you know. I always loved it, you know, those kind of big, the minute you hear them, and the DJ's talking over the intro, but you can hear it in the background and you recognize that song. It's a good sign.
Well, did you ever hear the cover of Digging Your Scene by Ivy?
Yeah, I thought it was nice. I enjoyed it. Yeah. I think more people should have a go on it. I think it's waiting for rediscovery by. Yeah, no, that was nice. Yeah, I'm always thrilled when someone covers it. It's such a buzz.
I think Stranger Things needs to use it in their show.
Yeah, well, if you've got any connections.
Well, wrapping up on that song, what all these years later, how do you view it? What's your take on it?
Only with fondness, and I'm just really glad that I stuck with it and I didn't throw it away. And it's probably the song, despite everything else that whatever we've done or whatever, it's probably the song that we'll be remembered for, and I'm cool with that.
Come on, baby.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about this classic 80s hidden gem and about the Blow Monkeys. Do you remember this song, this group? What is your take on it? You can hear it below in our link. We'll link to it there. If you like our videos, we do invite you to subscribe below to be a part of our community. And remember to get even more content. Help this mission of getting the stories behind all of the great artists and their songs. That is our goal. Hit us up on Patreon. Help us keep this music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth.